Leafs Lightning Game 2 getting underway tonight. Toronto punched Tampa in the mouth after the first game. Will they continue to roll in the second game? We'll dive into today's matchup and go around the league a little bit. It's a little bit of a dire situation in the goaltending area around the league. We'll dive into that as well on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me is my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to come along for the playoff ride with us and subscribe if you haven't already. If you are a subscriber, appreciate you coming back and joining us once again. You can get it for free wherever you get your podcast from. You can also subscribe now to the video format on YouTube. And we're actually going to be doing at some point here, we're still trying to coordinate it, Dave, but we're trying to coordinate a live kind of watch along type of thing. It'll kind of be a YouTube exclusive type of watch along. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll be able to come and watch us watch the game with us, I guess. Kind of go through the emotions, the roller coaster of what is the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then we could be interactive in the comment section. We could bring people onto the show as well. It'll be really fun, I think, to do something like that. So that's the type of content that we'll be doing on the YouTube page as well throughout this hopefully long playoff run. But Leafs Lightning Game 2 getting underway tonight, Dave. Toronto obviously up 1-0 after a 5-0 shellacking over the back-to-back defending Cup champs. But I think we both expect for Game 2 to be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I don't think you would expect to see the Tampa Bay Lightning make a habit of not only getting shut out, but looking like they did in the playoffs. This is not what we have come to expect from a team that's gone back to back the last few years.
No, and I would be surprised if we see Vasilevsky let in a 5 spot again the rest of the way, although I think we said that also when he let in 6 goals against Toronto about a month ago. So that's not going to happen in the playoffs. It only took one game for them to score 5 goals in the playoffs. But
Can I pull something up actually about that? Because
Yeah.
you bring up a good point. I got to give credit to your social department at TSN for bringing this to my attention. Actually, this is about Andrei Vasilevsky, and
his stats in after losses that we're bringing up.
yep, that's the one I'm bringing up. So if you give me 1 second here, here it is.
I got them locked and ready to go. But yeah, look at these statistics. So for those who are with us up on YouTube, you're looking at these statistics. But since Vasilevsky and the Tampa Bay Lightning were eliminated in that 4-game sweep that they kind of got shocked by the Columbus Blue Jackets, well, they haven't lost a playoff series since. They've rattled off 2 straight Stanley Cup victories. They've also never lost back-to-back games in the playoffs since that series. And coming off of losses, Andrei Vasilevsky, 14-0, a .966 save percentage with 5 shutouts. Yeah, I think we can expect a much better Andrei Vasilevsky based on history, his track record stemming off of playoff losses.
Yeah, that's like when people keep asking me, "Oh, what are you expecting Game 2? What's all the stats will show to expect a much tighter and more difficult Game 2, just based off of what we have seen from Tampa in the past."
So, what are you expecting to see out of the Lightning then? Like, what did they do so poorly Monday night that you think they can come out in tonight's game and establish things a lot better? What type of stuff can we expect to see, you think?
Well, in some of the goals the Leafs scored, the Lightning weren't pressing. They kind of collapsed back and gave the Leafs way too much time and space. I look at that Austin Matthews goal, his first goal of the game on the power play. He was allowed to just freely skate around the offensive zone, skate down, and just wire a shot.
He did. I'll say this. it was 5-on-3.
This is true, but if you're going, this is true. I also just feel like on a 5-on-3 situation, you're better off not allowing the play to get collapsed in on you, because then you're allowing a shooting gallery from high danger areas all over the ice. There was that one, but it's also like they got caught flat-footed way too much. Victor Hedman on the David Camp goal. I don't expect to see Victor Hedman do that again. I mean, anything can happen, but I don't expect to see that again. Vasilevsky was also off on a couple of those goals. Like the Muzzin goal kind of just went through him there. I like that. There's just a lot of uncharacteristic play from Tampa Bay Lightning. But I think the more important one is I think you're going to see a different offensive approach for them. I think maybe a little more patience and not maybe being a little more forceful with some of their attempts, right? Moving it a little more quickly, trying to get the Leafs to try to use the Leafs' aggressiveness against them, because I don't think they did that much.
Yeah, they definitely need to move the puck a lot quicker. I think that's a way to kind of break down because the Leafs did a great job of just stopping them in the neutral zone, and they weren't really able to break out with possession and get into the offensive end, and they weren't able to establish much possession in the O zone throughout the entire game. They only had 6 minutes of offensive zone possession time at the entire game for Tampa Bay, and if you look at their controlled entry rate, only 46%. Of their entries were controlled entries. So, and that's in comparison to Toronto, which had a 63% controlled entry rate. So, that play in the neutral zone is what really allowed Toronto to succeed. The fact that they were able to cut through Tampa's neutral zone with ease a lot of the time, and they weren't pressured, like you said. They kind of just collapsed and allowed Toronto to come down on them. And also, it was the Maple Leafs who kind of forced a lot of turnovers and allowed those easy entries because they were coming in on odd man rushes. Like I think they also had a whole whack of odd man rushes. I can pull it up in a moment. Yeah, they had 6 odd man rushes and they only allowed 1. So that gave them an opportunity to carry the puck in, establish possession time, and that was something that I would expect for Tampa to just try and be a little bit cleaner in the neutral zone, right? Try and get the puck, chip the puck in deep, go and get it. They have the boys that can go in and forecheck hard, hit the defenseman, and create a turnover. That was stuff that Toronto was doing quite well. Guys like Camp and Engvall and Mikheyev, right? You chip the puck in, you go in after it. I think that Tampa typically does have success doing those types of things, and it just didn't seem to work the other night. Granted, there was a lot of times where Toronto was batting pucks down too on attempts to do that.
Yeah.
So for Toronto, I think if they just kind of stick to their game, they're gonna have to game plan a little bit, play a little bit differently. I would think as well, like Toronto, like they're going to be some things that they look and Sheldon Keefe will look at that game with a fine tooth comb and find things that they could clean up and learn upon to be better in game 2. But at the end of the day, it's the Lightning who are definitely going to be a much better team, and Toronto's got to be ready for it. Toronto definitely is going to have to be ready for it. And I think, like, for me, that first goal of that hockey game is going to be important because we saw what Andre Vasilevsky, we just brought it up, right? 966 save percentage, 14-0, 5 shutouts coming off of losses in the playoffs the last 2 seasons. If you can score the first goal after posting 5 on him the night before, maybe that shakes his confidence a little bit. And he's not a guy who gets rattled too often, but perhaps that could throw him off his game. If you can get Vasilevsky off his game, which doesn't happen that often, granted, that will really bode well for Toronto. We saw it happen in game 1 where he fumbled the puck. That doesn't happen too often. We saw him guess on Marner's goal. He doesn't make a mistake like that too often. He seemed to really get his mind was in the gutter at times in that game. It seems like he had a couple of blunders, and I'm not expecting to see it again. But if the Maple Leafs can score first and maybe strike early, perhaps it does kind of get in his head a little bit, and Toronto can try and take advantage from there.
I think you also just have to keep the pressure on Tampa, right? Don't let up. Don't let Tampa think that they're gonna, don't let them off easy if they make mistakes. But also realize like they're trying to play this off as kind of a one-off, right? Well, you found something to exploit with this team. They're going to make adjustments and try to fix it, but don't let them off easy, right? Like keep the pressure on them.
Adjustments was the word I was looking for a moment ago, and I just could not think of it. Thank you so much for saying that word. I'm like, okay, that's the word I was looking for, and I couldn't find it, so I talked around it for a couple of seconds there. But now I know it. Yeah, no, you're completely right though. So it's going to be a good. I think this will be more of a tight game. This will be more of a playoff, the tight playoff game that we expected. I'm expecting a lower scoring game and probably just as physical, but definitely more lower scoring. Definitely more urgency on puck carriers from both sides, and I think it'll be a good one. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we get back, let's dive into some of the lineup changes that we may see ahead of game two due to some guys returning and also some guys who are ineligible to play. And I'll let you know all about that in a moment. But before I get into that, why don't I tell you guys all about our friends over at Rock Auto? With the ever increasing numbers and makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You got computers with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? For example, you got a Honda Odyssey fuel pump. You paid $353 at the chain store. Rock Auto's got it for $216. You can get that thing shipped that day. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices are reliably low for every customer. Amazing selection. Just make sure you go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on their "How'd you hear about us" box. Let them know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts a car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. Just a reminder, we're a daily Maple Leafs podcast. So we'd really appreciate if you subscribed. We're here giving new episodes each and every day, Monday through Friday. And we're along for the entire playoff ride. So it'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully you join us. And I'm hoping it's a long one. We're feeling good. We're riding high after game one. Game two goes down tonight. And hopefully they can keep the good vibes rolling all the way down to Tampa for a game three. Hopefully they got a nice cushion and a 2-game lead as they do that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the lineup changes that we will see tonight. So before we get into that, why don't we talk a little bit about the I guess the punishment that was handed out from the melee that was of game one. 113 penalty minutes, and there was 3 fines and a suspension handed out in that game. So fines given to Wayne Simmons, Corey Perry, and Patrick Maroon for unsportsmanlike conduct. That all stemming from that third period line brawl, essentially. Somehow Morgan Riley escaped, I guess, getting fined for whatever. That's fine, okay. I guess he kind of got jumped. That was more of a fight than being unsportsmanlike. So those guys get unsportsmanlike conducts. Kyle Clifford suspended officially. He gets 1 game for his hit on Ross Colton. Dave, did you agree with this? A 1-game suspension?
Yeah, I expected it. Those are it was a bad hit and I was not surprised it was fine in the game. I thought maybe the only reason he might escape punishment was because he got ejected, but I just think there's no defending that hit. There's no defending the fact that Colton didn't have the puck, wasn't even looking at it. Clifford kind of also just skated by and just felt like, all right, I'm just going to just plow this guy into the boards. It's just a bad play altogether. And I think it sent a pretty good message to other players in this series to maybe consider those types of hits, really think about those hits before laying them. Yeah, deserved punishment. It wasn't a good hit, and it's unfortunate because Kyle Clifford thought he could have been needed to help atone with some of this physical play that we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, he really only got in there for 49 seconds, and the Maple Leafs, in his absence, were able to kind of hold their own, if we're being completely honest. So maybe he's not, but it really was kind of that hit and that 5 minute kill that did set the tone also for that game and kind of gave the team momentum. So in a way, he did help the squad, but he won't be there for game two. No word as to who exactly draws in his place, and that's because Michael Bunting could be that guy who could draw back into the lineup. Obviously, he's not going to come in on the fourth line. He'll be reunited back on the top line. But in terms of the 12 skaters, there was some talk perhaps Spezza could end up getting back into the lineup if Clifford comes out. But if Bunting's ready to go, then I think you keep with the same guys, Spezza or Blackwell, Simmons, and then maybe you put Kasha on the fourth line, and then you end up having Michael Bunting up on the top line. And you kick Kerfoot back to the second line. That to me probably sounds like what I would try and do. And if you actually take a look at what we saw today in practice, that almost does seem as though that's what we're going to see. Now, Nylander and Engvall were both absent from practice, which did raise some red flags, I would say. For a second, I'm like, oh no, that's not good. And then post practice, Sheldon Keefe came out and said, no, they're good. They'll be playing tomorrow. And if you take a look at the practice lines that were out there, Kyle Clifford, David Kampf, and Jason Spezza is the third line. I would bet that is not what they intended on throwing out there. So, in my opinion, I think that Nylander and Engvall slide into Clifford and Spezza's spot, which means Kasha, Blackwell, and Simmons probably going to be the fourth line with Mikheyev, Tavares, and Kerfoot as a second line. Bunting reunited up with Matthews and Marner. Now, Bunting, granted, still a game time decision, but it's likely that he'll play.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, right? Is Bunting kind of made it seem like he was going to be fine, and getting in practice was important for him. He couldn't declare himself to play. I just think, yeah, if we're going to look at, would you rather have Bunting or Spezza? Think you're going to want to go with Michael Bunting because I assume Tampa is going to try to throw Matthews and Marner off their game in a way that teams, like you kind of get where I'm going at with this. Like they're not going to make it any easy on Matthews and Marner. They're going to try to get into their heads a little bit with some physical play there, and I think Michael Bunting can be can kind of help in that regard.
The only thing about Michael Bunting, and this was what happened in the 8-1 loss that they had when they played a couple of weeks ago. Once things kind of got out of hand, that guy, it seemed like any time there was a whistle, he was mucking it up with somebody. He was either yapping or he was getting in the face of someone, getting in the grill, grabbing a jersey, giving a face wash, and it got to a point where he ended up getting tossed from the game for essentially just being a bit of a dink, to be quite honest with you. And I just hope that he doesn't kind of cross that line. Like in a way, I get it. He kind of has a little bit of that Marchand pain in the ass agitator in him, and that's his game, right? That's also what I think will make him an intriguing playoff player. But at the same time, I don't need Matthews and Marner being dragged into brawls because Bunting is chopping at the goalie or chopping at Hedman's shin pads because he just wants to make his presence known. You know what I mean? And at that point, where it just becomes grab a guy or Marner Matthews have to go in for their guy, and all of a sudden, they're brawling with some of the tougher, bigger dudes on the Lightning. That's the one thing that worries me about Bunting. I wasn't worried about Kerfoot doing any of that, but Michael Bunting could. Let's just hope that if it happens, nothing does get out of hand.
Yeah, no, I don't want a situation like there. This is the last thing I want. I was not happy to see Morgan Rielly get into that. He kind of had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
He was sticking up for his teammate. I don't want to see any of those core players getting it mixed into that stuff because it's just you're asking for trouble in that regard. Because Tampa is going to be like, yeah, we have no problem doing that. We can take Matthews and Marner and make the no. I don't think I think Matthews and Marner are smart enough not to get themselves into that situation, but motions of the playoffs can change anything in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. They can, and oftentimes too, you may not want to get into that situation, but you get dragged into those situations.
Yeah.
Kind of saw that happen with Kasha when everything was going down, and Pierre Belmar just decided to ragdoll him around the ice. Well, if you sit there and you start ragdolling Matthews and Marner, that's just going to escalate things to a completely another level. So yeah, we'll see how it shakes down. But obviously, the team's way better off with Bunting in the lineup than out of the lineup. I think he's been exceptional this season. So if he can play, I think that clearly will be good for that top line. Who, I mean, it's funny. You go back, you look at how much that line of Kerfoot, Matthews, and Marner actually got to play together at 5-on-5. There's only like 4 minutes the entire game that they got to play together because there was so many penalties and a lot of time was played at 5-on-4, whether they were killing penalties or on the power play themselves. There was 11 power plays throughout the game. So um, this will kind of be a chance for Matthews and Martin to establish themselves at 5-on-5 in this series. Defensively, doesn't look like we're going to get any changes. Morgan Riley, Labushkin, Muzzin Brody, and Gio and Liljegren were the three pairs on the ice today with Sandin and Hall as kind of that fourth pair. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Go with it. Go with it again because that defense was rock solid in game one.
Yeah, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? And the only time we should really expect to see anything change is if there's an injury, right? And there's something to be said about messing with winning formula. You don't do it. I think this has really been the best lineup the Leafs could put out on the blue line. And yeah, again, was there a player that looked out of sorts or looked like they didn't belong? I didn't see it. So yeah, I'm not. I mean, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if the only way we see anything change is if there's an injury because we've seen the Leafs tinker with the blue line in past playoff series. I think this is one of the few times where you can say that everything is kind of set in stone.
Yeah, unless somebody really has a bad game, like if Labushkin just goes out there and is a pylon essentially, I could see potentially some tinkering going on. But outside of that, I think the rest of these guys, like Liljegren, maybe, but again, he's played so well as of late, especially on a third pair assignment with Giordano. But like those two are the only guys who I think would be in consideration to come out of the lineup. And both, I think, Sandy and Hall are more than worthy of playing, in a top six in a playoff series. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But obviously, going into game two, they're keeping it status quo, which I agree with. I agree with that decision. Obviously, Jack Campbell going to start in net, stemming off of a shutout. We know that. Mrazek was practicing today, got a full practice in. He's not ready to go quite yet, but sounds like he will be ready to go at some point in this series, and they'll have to make the decision whether or not they want to have Mrazek as the backup or Eric Shalgren as the backup. We could decide that and have that conversation once it kind of gets there, I suppose. No sense in wasting time on that quite yet. But speaking of the goaltenders, there is some interesting stuff going on around the rest of the league in the NHL when it comes to the goalie department. We thought that it was a situation in Toronto. The goaltending situation was dire here. That turns out to not have been the case in the last 2 weeks, and especially in game one. But around the NHL, definitely some more situations that are, I guess we could call them a tad troubling if you are fans of those teams. We'll take a quick break. When we get back, we'll kind of dive into the goaltending situation around the NHL. There's injuries, there's guys underperforming. It really does seem like almost every single series in the first round has question marks in goal. So we'll get to those in a bit. But first, Dave, how about a word from one of our show sponsors?
Yes, summer is coming along, and obviously with summer you're going to need some good food to get on the go. So why not pick up the perfect snack in a Built Bar? You can take them anywhere with you, throw them in your bag, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so they are fueled for their summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to built.com and order right now. All Built Bars and their puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it as well. They have many, 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 many great flavors. Banana cream pie, churro, raspberry, double chocolate, cookies and cream. Do I need to go on?
My
Probably
favorite.
not. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Check them out over at built.com, and you can also see some of the nutritional facts, including 30 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Some great value over there at Built Bar. If you want more great value, go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. So that is the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with me. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. You can find us wherever you get your pods, also up on YouTube as well. We would appreciate if you went and subscribe there, along with subscribing to the audio format. Allows you to watch it on the go, at home, on your computer, on your phone, wherever you get your podcasts. So this isn't the only series that's going on, Toronto and Tampa, clearly. It's round one. We've got an additional, what's there, 4, 5? No, sorry, I'm blanking. 7 series going on around the NHL. Additional 7. I almost forgot about the Western Conference. I've been so focused on the past little bit. So there's an additional 7 series going on around the NHL, and there is essentially like a goalie controversy of some kind in every single one. Somehow, some way, the Toronto-Tampa goaltending situation seems to be the most stable one of the bunch. Would you have thought that like 4 weeks ago?
Probably not. I mean, here's the thing: like goaltending has become such an interesting topic around the NHL because teams have shifted away from the whole one guy that kind of does it all because the amount of pressure and just the strain that gets put on a starter. You're not seeing starters go 70 games anymore. It's just never going to happen again with injuries too. So you're seeing more teams have a couple of guys, and when one kind of falters a bit, there is another one right behind. Some teams, though, unfortunately, aren't as lucky as others.
Yeah, and I mean the Leafs don't have depth there, I guess you could say. So they're still, if an injury does occur, there's clearly going to be issues. But for now, things look good when it comes to the Leafs and both Tampa having Campbell and Vasilevsky. There's no controversy. They're the clear cut number ones, and they're both healthy right now. Both healthy. There's not a single other series in the NHL playoffs that can say that about both goaltenders in said series. Let's start with what we saw last night. Boston and Carolina. The Carolina Hurricanes are down Freddie Anderson. They had to go to Antti Ranta. Had a good game, had a great game, but he's their second goaltender, and even he has had some injury history in the past. And in the final couple of games of the season, they had to roll out a rookie third-string goaltender because Ranta ended up getting hurt after Anderson did. But he's ready. He's ready to play, and he ended up winning them in game 1. Game 2, you don't know who's your starter. You've got 2 guys there, Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. Ullmark gave up 5 goals yesterday and is going to be in net again for game 2, reportedly. So there's that situation there. That's one of the more stable ones, I suppose. But the Carolina being down to Antti Ranta does not sound great. So that's one. In the St. Louis, Minnesota series from yesterday, there's 4 goalies that legitimately have been starters at points of the season. Which one you're going to go with on a nightly basis, I don't know. Though in game 1, it was Marc-Andre Fleury and Ville Husso. Could you see them yanking Fleury and rolling with Cam Talbot in game 2 after getting shut out 4-0? I could see that.
And it's interesting because after the Marc-Andre Fleury trade, a lot of Leafs fans are like, this could be a trade we might regret and it could cost us playoff success. I'm not going to totally disagree with that.
One game. Let's not get carried away here, Dave.
After one game, But Fleury, it was not a good. Minnesota in general just looked terrible
Mm.
in that first game against St. Louis. David Perron looked pretty good for them.
He's a decent player. Decent player.
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis is a good team, man. It's gonna be a hell of a series, though. Like Minnesota, the same vein that I think Tampa's gonna really, come back with a vengeance in Game 2. I think Minnie will do the exact same thing tomorrow night. But you got like Minnesota's there, and then you got Jordan Binnington riding the bench at any point. Billy Huso, who has no playoff experience himself, he could turn into a pumpkin, right? At some point.
Definitely.
And then you got to go back to Jordan Binnington. So bit of an unstable situation where you have four guys who are starting caliber goaltenders, and you just got to kind of flip a coin and hopefully you start the right goaltender on the right night. So that's an interesting situation. Edmonton and LA, right? You've got Quick.
Mike Smith. Oh boy.
Yeah. So I was gonna say Quick and Cal Peterson kind of are two guys who split the crease this year. Went with Johnny Quick, had a great game last night, got them the victory. And then Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen, who have been a tandem, they rolled with Mike Smith, and it cost them dearly. Apparently, they're keeping it. Jay Woodcroft came out to the media and said they know who they're starting in Game 2, but they're not letting anyone else know. So they're keeping it tight to the vest, which I find to be interesting. I think it'll probably be Mike Smith. I think he'll get one more game. But I saw a statistic that Mike Smith has lost 10 straight playoff games. 10 straight playoff games. How do you go back to that guy?
It's tough because like that was a close game. He was okay, except minus the massive blunder at the end there.
That cost him the game.
Yeah, that kind of cost him. He did his best to recover. I will give him that.
Yeah,
but you don't want to. It causes the team to just discombobulate. I understand that, but like Koskinen, does he inspire that much more confidence? In my opinion, he doesn't. But if LA wins Game 2, you got no choice.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Typically, we do see starters who struggle in the playoffs. If you're in a bit of a tandem or like a not as stable as like a Vasilevsky type of guy, typically you get 2 games. If you don't show up in those 2 games, you'll get the hook. Like we've seen that time and time again in many playoff series. So I think we'll see Flower get another one in Game 2. We'll see Mike Smith get another shot in Game 2, and it sounds like Olmark will get another shot for Boston also in Game 2. But again, just so much controversy and decisions to be made by coaches in those games. And then we'll scroll to what we see on the what we had last night, I suppose, since we're recording this currently actually on Tuesday night. It's what are they in triple overtime right now? Rangers.
Dude, this game has been nuts.
Yeah, triple overtime between Rangers and Pitt, and the Rangers were screwed, or the Pittsburgh was screwed before the series even started because Tristan Jarry broke his foot like 2 weeks before the season ended, and then it was Casey DeSmith's net. Well, Casey DeSmith left the game in the second overtime today, and it's currently now Louis Domingue in goal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not ideal against the New York Rangers.
And the Pittsburgh Penguins have 76 shots on goal.
Dude, it's insane. He is currently, they just showed it, perfect, 12 shots away from tying the record for shots for saves in a game. Shesterkin, 12 saves away from tying the record for saves in a game.
This game has been this series is going to be an interesting one. I thought New York was going to handily have this series just because of the goaltending matchup, and New York is pretty good. Then I also forgot Sidney Crosby plays pretty well in the playoffs.
Can never count them. Crosby and Gino can never count them out.
I'm going to also add in another thing.
Goalie. They're down to a third string goalie now.
Yeah. So I didn't realize it was Louis Domingue. I think actually they probably are lucky it's Louis Domingue because Louis Domingue as a third string goalie, not the worst thing. But here's the funny part. Elliot Friedman, because they're on their backup right now, he actually brought in the fact that Reed Robertson is the E-bug in New York. And I'm going, oh, please, God, if we see an E-bug in overtime in the playoffs.
Imagine he wins, though.
Oh, my God.
Like, that would just be awesome.
That would trump David. That should in my opinion, trump David Ayers.
Oh, a playoff victory? Absolutely. Not even close. All right, let's move on and chat about a couple because legitimately every single series
Yeah,
has some
I agree.
question marks. Basically, Colorado, Nashville. Colorado is just filling the net tonight on Nashville, and why is that? Well, because UC Soros is not available for this team for the first couple of games in this series because he got injured towards the end of the season, and it's David Riddick and rookie Connor Ingram in goal. Riddick getting pulled after allowing 5 in the first period, and then Ingram has come in and I guess settled it a little bit, but they're still down 6-2 after 2 as of the time of recording this. But yeah, not an ideal situation for Nashville. Calgary and Dallas, that one's somewhat stable. Jake Ottinger is the guy there right now, but he has 0 playoff experience himself. Going up against a guy like Jacob Markstrom, who's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. And that's just a massive disparity there. And I don't think there's necessarily a long leash on Ottinger if he ends up blowing it after a couple of games. Playing well so far. He's only allowed 1 goal through the second period as of recording this. So that one I would say there seems to be some stability actually. But even then, no. Is Holtby still hurt?
Holtby's hurt. It's Scott Wedgwood is the backup for Dallas. So actually,
So there is. Holtby's hurt. that's
yeah, like,
that's the situation there. It's either an injury or a controversy or a tandem, and here it's the injury to Braden Holtby.
I mean, to be fair, Dallas has gone 3 injuries in goaltenders when you had Ben Bishop and why am I blanking on the other goaltender that took him to the
Oh,
Stanley Cup?
is it we're not going home? That guy? What's that? Oh
What?
no!
Oh, Khudobin.
Who?
Anton Khudobin.
It's a Khudobin. Yes, right. We're not going home. I love that clip. That's hilarious. And then Washington, Florida, the last one we haven't talked about. Tandem in Washington. Both Vanacek and Samsonov. Neither of those two were particularly good at stopping pucks this year. They did well tonight. Vanacek ended up getting the 4-2 win for Washington for them to surprisingly take game 1 in Florida. A team that only lost 6 home games all season, they lose game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs at home in a bit of a shock. But, that's another team where what Bobrovsky are you going to get? Is it going to be the all-star Vezina caliber, or are you going to see the pumpkin that you see every other year?
Are we going to see Spencer Knight in this series? I
Yeah.
mean, he didn't have a great season, but there's a lot riding on Florida. Like, Florida went all in on this year.
Yeah, they did. It's another situation where I think it's similar to the situation that you have in Boston, where you have kind of an established goaltender. I wouldn't say that Ullmark is nearly as established as Bobrovsky, but he's a veteran goaltender at the very least.
Yeah.
And then you have an up-and-coming rookie goaltender who you could dub as the goalie of the future, I suppose, for your organization, kind of as the tandem, 1B type of guy who, if it doesn't go well in game 1 and game 2, you probably go to the next guy, and we'll see a Spencer Knight and a Jeremy Swayman if things don't go well for those two goalies. So, legitimately, the
quick
only
note on that game.
What's that?
A quick note on that Florida game, too, because the Capitals are trailing going into the third period. Teams were 0-39-1 against Florida in the regular season when trailing after 40 minutes. They were 0-22 when playing Tampa at home.
Playing Florida.
Florida home. So this is the first game Florida has lost at home with the lead. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, totally different season.
Hey, man, and it was Ovi who just made like a great play in the neutral zone, similarly to the way that Toronto was doing things, forcing neutral zone turnovers, and you get the puck counterattack going the other way, and Kuznetsov makes a nice move and scores a goal, gives the little flap of the wings, like the bird, the capital, the bald eagle in a way. It was a great goal to kind of take the 3-2 lead, and they get an empty netter as well to make it 4-2. I'm not sure how that fourth goal was scored, but it would make sense because it was pretty late in the game.
Empty netter.
Yeah, Kuzi made it 3-2, so that would make some sense. But yeah, like outside of that, I mean, even Toronto, like, if you want to call Peter Mrazek, I suppose, a little bit of an injury situation because he's supposed to be the backup and 1B, but I think Campbell's pretty firmly has the starter's role, so I wouldn't consider it as dire as the rest of them. But just goes to show how we were very focused in this season about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the goaltending situation in Toronto and how that was going to be the X factor. If Toronto's goaltending isn't going to shape up, then like how is this going to all work out? There's goaltending issues all around the NHL. There's only like a handful of actual quality goaltending in the NHL. It's kind of bizarre.
It truly is. I think it's the one position that means so much and yet gets kind of neglected at times.
I wouldn't say it gets neglected. I just don't think that there's a very large talent pool of true stud horse 1A or no, straight up ones, not 1A, but straight up ones
Yeah,
who can go
I
out
think it's a
there
better
and
way of saying it.
decide games in the way that Vasilevsky can do it, in the way that Markstrom can do it. Connor Hellebuck, I would throw into there on a regular year. He had a down season this year, but he's a guy who typically is able to kind of show up every year. Carey Price in the past was that guy. Hasn't been that guy in a bit. Obviously, was last year in the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury is that guy as well, I would argue. But again, Flower and Talbot they've been changing the net all season long. It's been a tandem. If there was a lesser goaltender, I think it wouldn't be much of a conversation. But it is with Talbot and Marc Andre Fleury to make it a little
Mhm.
interesting, a little internal competition, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, and it's helped some clubs. Think back to when Washington won the Stanley Cup. It was Grubauer who was the starter. Lose game one, lose game two to make the switch in net. Then it never looked back. They rode Holtby all the way to the Stanley Cup final, right?
It's true.
So who knows how everything's going to kind of shake out around the league with the goaltending situation, but it certainly is. It's very unstable, I guess we could say. It makes me
Oh,
feel a little bit better about what we got going on here.
no record for Shesterkin.
Oh, it's over. There it is on the 83rd shot. So he had 80 saves in the game. Or no, 79 saves in the game. Pittsburgh 4-3 win over the Rangers in overtime. Point shot looked like it may have went off of a guy in front. There was some traffic there. Well, Pittsburgh takes game one. That's a bit of a shock. Not going to lie, a bit of a shock. Louis Domingue coming from the depths of the NHL and comes all the way, becomes the winning goaltender in this series.
Crazy.
Craziness. This is the NHL. We had two big upsets tonight.
Oh, it's Malcolm with the tip in
Gino.
front.
Gino with
With
the
a beautiful tip on his Russian mate. Savage. Oh, man.
Oh, great tip too. Yep, you guys are definitely gonna have to go and check that out. You probably have already seen it by the time you're listening to this.
Yeah. If
We're
you haven't
watching it
watched
live.
it, oh, man.
We're watching it live. It's a good one. All right. Why don't we call it a day here, pal? I'm excited, man. Game 2 tonight. It'll be a much closer matchup, but I think it'll be more telling as to how good this Maple Leafs team actually is. When there's a pushback on the other side from Tampa, how do they respond? I think those answers we'll find out tonight and see if this year really is different. Is it really different? Tonight will tell us more than I think we found out in game 1. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show at Locked On Leafs and also follow us on and subscribe to us on YouTube, Locked On Leafs on YouTube. We'll be back in another episode tomorrow. We are going to be breaking down Game 2, Leafs and Bolts. Puck drop at 7:30 tonight. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.